iPhone 17 Pro, if you haven't seen one of these style of videos, it's when I take a product that's incredibly popular and there's a billion videos out there, and I try to approach things from a different angle. Hopefully I can cover some things that you haven't seen on some of the other channels. And because I know this isn't your first click, second click, third click, maybe fourth or even fifth click on different iPhone videos, so I appreciate you guys coming to the channel. I know it's been beaten to death, but I do want to spend some time talking about this new design. It's about time since we've seen a design change in phone design, because I'm getting so sick and tired of seeing nothing but the glass back phones. This offers something a little bit different, and one way they were able to accomplish that was by getting away from titanium. And I know titanium is a stronger and more premium material, but getting away from titanium allows them to do a whole bunch of different things, which I will cover throughout this video. We've always been asking for more expressive colors on our Pro series of phones, and we finally got it. Anodizing aluminum is much easier to do than titanium. In fact, the only colors I've ever seen on titanium is silver, which always just kind of has like a bronze tint to it, black, or gold. Rest in peace, the Essential phone. I'm more than okay with switching over to aluminum. They could make the entire phone out of aluminum because the magnets and MagSafe and also the coils inside that allows for wireless charging doesn't go through metal. So they still need a little bit of glass, and they're calling it Ceramic Shield 2. But where the build really shines here is I'm not able to feel any seams from where the metal and the glass begins. It just feels completely smooth. On the top right of my particular unit, I can feel it a little bit, but I bet these manufacturing tolerances will improve over time. Ever since I got it, everyone was just really impressed by how amazing this phone looked, especially in this bright orange color. I absolutely love it. And with this new design, it's less angular, so there's gentle curves in the size. And even though this is a heavy flagship compared to its competition, it doesn't feel as heavy. It's got to be down to the weight distribution. That's very, very important in a phone. There's phones lighter than this that have felt more unwieldy to hold. But the way this phone is balanced, it just sits nicely in your hand. You won't know how heavy it is unless you looked up the specs. But despite all that, most people will be using a case, and I decided to get the tech woven case this year, and it was a bit risky because that previous fine woven that they rolled out a few years ago was an absolute disaster. I hated that case. This is so much better. It's made with some type of fiber, and I had to zoom way in to start to see the stitching on this case. I feel like this one will hold up a lot better than the previous one. The side and the back are made out of two different types of materials. I kind of wish it was just like one cohesive design. Very similar to the Banks case. The thing is though, as awesome as this is, the moment you turn it around, it just becomes a regular iPhone. It's the same aspect ratio, the same screen size. Once you start using it, you forget that you're using a new iPhone. So that's something to keep in mind in case you were wondering if you should upgrade or not. I will say though that this display seems much better than last year's display on the 16 Pro Max. It's even brighter, and not only that, I've noticed that Apple's display engine tweaks the colors and the contrast to make sure it's even more visible outside, which I don't really see a lot of other phones doing. So on top of it being brighter, and even better when it's on the lowest brightness setting, Apple's display engine still allows you to see content fairly well to where you don't have to bump up the brightness late at night to look at content. Even photos, the gamma and the shadow details are very well preserved, which is not something I see in all their phones. So even though Apple uses the same panel as all their phones, they don't manufacture their own displays, at least not yet. It's kind of similar to what Sony does with their TVs. They use panels from LG and Sony, but their TVs usually wins in every single display competition out there. Is because of the processing, and Apple is by far the best at processing video and images and just the overall colors on their phones, while also still remaining accurate. One thing that Apple has advertised with their new Ceramic Shield 2 is the better reflection handling, and it seems fine. It's not as good as Samsung's, but it doesn't seem to affect the contrast as much as the Galaxy does, and it doesn't seem to affect the sharpness at all either. So it's a subtle approach, and it's not heavy-handed to where it's going to look like a matte coating, which a lot of people don't like, including myself, because it reduces contrast and it makes things look a little bit more fuzzy. One thing I have not been able to test yet is Apple is promising that this will hold up much better to scratches. And my iPhone 16 Pro Max, this is my third unit of that phone, and all three of them got really bad scratches shortly after getting them. I hate using screen protectors, and I usually would just prefer scratches over putting on a screen protector. I know, probably not the best decision, but I'm really interested to see how resistant to scratches this new iPhone, and hopefully they can retain the same durability as they have before, because the iPhone 16 Pro Max was completely indestructible. It fell so many times without a case and not even a dent. I wonder if switching to aluminum would have any impact on durability long term. Hard to tell right now, but we'll see what happens going forward. And maybe I'll do a 6-month update to this phone. If you want to subscribe, I'll really appreciate that. In fact, I just hit 10,000 subscribers, so thank you guys so much. Can't wait to get another 10,000 subs and even more. Anyway, another thing that they've improved on this phone, which Apple has suffered from before, was slow wired charging. I don't care what Apple advertises. When I'm doing my testing, I'm only able to get up to like 38 to 39 watts of charging, which is actually really good. A lot of companies offer fast charging, but when you actually start charging it, you don't get those advertised speeds. And what ends up happening is when your battery is low, that's when the charging is faster. But then once you go over 50%, the charging starts to slow down. So it's not like you're going to get 45 or 60 watts charging the entire time. So just something to keep in mind. And the battery life so far seems to be in line with the 16 Pro Max, which is among the best. So we're getting the best of both worlds, fast charging and long-lasting battery. Okay, and I know not everybody cares about this, but it does affect everyone. Performance. Apple is claiming that the performance should be better on this phone, and a lot of why they're able to do that is because of this bump on the back, and it's called the plateau. That's the first and last time I'll ever call it that, but it seems to be a trend, and I'm noticing that with gaming laptops too. There's been a few laptop brands like the 2025 Razers where they have a bump at the back where it gives them more space so they're able to have better cooling. The iPhone, for the very first time, has a vapor chamber. And without me getting too nerdy, all you need to know is that it should keep the phone cooler and for longer. So I ran a test. Here's the results of Steel Nomad Lite. It's my favorite test to use. I use it for both gaming laptops, phones, regular laptops, handheld devices, and everything in between, because it is rendering the same graphics using Vulkan, and it's a test of how these different devices runs the same test. So it's the closest thing I have to where we can compare different products from different manufacturers, different chips, different architectures, different operating systems, etc. And one thing I want to highlight first is this is very close to the ROG Ally X. So man, you might be thinking, I don't need my handheld device anymore. Not necessarily. So as awesome as this new vapor chamber is and how much improvement it does offer to the iPhone, this next test is an older test. I'm only using it still because I have a lot of legacy devices that I tested it on, but it runs the same benchmark 20 times, and this benchmark does completely 100% stress out the CPU and the GPU of your phone. So what you're seeing is the frames per second, and it starts really high, but you can see that it starts to thermal throttle, and the score does start to dip as more and more runs happen. So by the time you get to the last run, you're getting the lowest score. But then let's take a look at the iPhone 15 and 16 Pro series. It doesn't dip as much, but the iPhone 17 Pro Max still outperforms those phones, even though it dips faster. So that just indicates to me that this is not a gaming phone. So even though the first score might be in line with the ROG Ally X, but those speeds are not sustained, you can see that there still is a drop. But having said that though, I did play several rounds of Call of Duty Mobile, and to me it felt like a smooth 120 hertz the entire time. As you can see though, looking at the Nubia Z70S Ultra that is using the Snapdragon 8 Elite, and it's still outperforming the A19 Pro and the 17 Pro Max. And that got me thinking, so I started looking up the specs between the A19 Pro and the A18 Pro, and I'm pretty much convinced at this point that it's the same chip. Maybe it's just a better binned version of this chip, and because of the better cooling solutions that Apple was able to implement with the 17 Pro series, they're able to squeeze more performance out of it. And I know you're probably thinking I don't care about performance, but it does affect everyone. You're going to be able to record longer without the phone overheating and without the screen starting to dim. This phone never got more than just a little bit warm to the touch, compared to the 16 Pro Max, which got hot sometimes. And whenever Apple Intelligence finally rolls out, it might be able to run the local models faster and maybe be able to do more complex requests without having to rely on going to the cloud. And speaking of Apple Intelligence, it's silently getting better. When I was driving around, I drove past my local gym and my digital membership card popped up on the lock screen. So based off of my location, it noticed that I was near my gym, and then it thought, hey, maybe you might want to easily reach your access card. And there's been a few nice little conveniences that I've noticed throughout using the phone. Now camera, and you've heard a billion times by now that the front-facing camera is a square sensor, so you could do portrait and landscape photos without having to rotate the phone. But one thing I've noticed, and that's one thing I was really worried about, there's a reason why most cameras don't use the entire sensor, because around the edges, there's a ton of distortion. And what that means is people on the furthest left and the furthest right of the photo, their faces will look stretched out, and it is incredibly unflattering. Same thing with the top and the bottom, so that's definitely something to keep in mind when you're taking photos of large groups. My recommendation is to keep it cropped most of the time unless you actually need it, but this new selfie camera is the best selfie camera I have ever used. During the daytime, it's incredibly sharp. In some cases, it rivals the main shooter, but then in medium to low light, because at the end of the day, it is a smaller sensor, it starts to lose a lot of detail, which is to be expected, but still very usable and still fairly good compared to the competition. The telephoto camera did get a bump, so that is sharper, but the rest of the cameras remain the same. But I think what really makes this iPhone better is Apple's color processing. They've always had issues with their white balance. It's finally improved now to where things look a little bit more normal. The white balance still has like an orange tint to it, which I don't like. You can see this in the video of this indoor setting. That's usually where the white balance struggles the most, is when you're indoors. This video is the Pixel 10 Pro XL, and yes, while the iPhone might be sharper, just focus more on the colors here. I like the white balance, but the iPhone just has like a weird orangish tint to it, and it just betrays color sometimes. I really wish they would just add a white balance sensor. That would just solve all the issues. That's the next thing they need to do. So I don't want to spend too much time talking about the camera because it is better overall, but it's not monumentally better except for the selfie camera. You can actually see the white balance here. This is that weird yellow orange tint that I'm talking about. The background here should be gray. And it does figure it out after a while once it's able to see more of the scene. The previous iPhone used to struggle with this. That's why I never used the iPhone professionally in this setting, because the white balance was just wrong all the time. This is the type of white that my dog should be looking, so it's much more usable now. I'm really happy with it. You know, another thing, since I'm here, I'm making sure I turn off the macro mode. The close focusing distance has not been improved compared to other phones in its price class. So here's the Google Pixel 10 Pro XL. I don't have the macro mode on, but look how much closer I'm able to get with the Pixel 10 Pro XL compared to the iPhone. So you can use the better sensor at closer distances without having to rely on the worse macro lens. So something else I was hoping that Apple would fix, but they just didn't this year. Alright, so I don't want to make this video longer than it needs to be. If you want to see a follow-up video and eventually a longer term review, please get subscribed. Thanks again for 10,000 subs, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye.